So changes are happening, you can sense it? Good. Good, all right. Malik, I'll give you a call. Okay. Wondering if I should. I don't see them on the list. That's what I was looking for. No. Is this the list? Nothing on here.
You want to bring them up?
Nothing understood. Oh, okay.
So,
Okay. Well, I'll talk about it.
continue to talk about it.
Okay.
By the way, that was the research for the only school district.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. We'll see what happens. We'll see. Is that her? Okay, I mean, okay.
Yeah. You gonna add her?
How goes it?
¿Cómo están?
Cansado.
¿Cansados? ¿Por qué?
Trabajando mucho.
¿Estás trabajando mucho?
Sí. Yo quiero dormir.
It may still be in her hands.
Sí. Por 2 días.
A lo menos.
A lo menos.
Cynthia. All right.
Board of Education meeting is hereby called to order. We have a quorum, so we will get started. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, if you can take your seats and any conversations that you're having, if you can take them outside. If you have a cell phone, please put it on vibrate.
Unless you're up here.
Unless you're up here and you can, talk on your phone. If you're up here, you may want to turn it off. We will start our meeting with a act of reverence and pledge allegiance to the flag, led by our student rep, Mr. Loss. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Board members should have received minutes from 3 meetings in your board packets on Friday, January 22nd, February 9th, and February 18th. I'll start with acceptance of the minutes from January 22nd. I'll entertain a motion to approve minutes from January 22nd.
So
Moved by Commissioner Elliott. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Vice President White. All those in favor of the January 22nd minutes, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes are accepted. We will now move to acceptance of the February 9th special meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve minutes from February 9th.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Elliott. Is there a second? Seconded by Vice President White. Student Rep advisory vote?
Aye.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Those minutes are accepted. We also have very, very brief minutes from the public hearing on the University Preparatory Charter School for Young Men. I'll entertain a motion to approve. Moved by Commissioner Elliott. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Vice President White. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. And then also part of that February 18th docket, there's minutes from the special meeting of February 18th, which followed the public hearing. I'll entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Elliott. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Vice President White. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. We had tons of student recognition this evening, so we won't be having any on the agenda further. And I want to thank all those students that did excellent performances this evening, 58 School and the Urban Steel Band. We have some speakers addressing an agenda item. I will call your name. When you come up to the podium, you will have 2 minutes to speak. Please don't place me in a position of having to interrupt your words and ask you to take your seat after the 2 minutes are up. I'll explain to you, these are speakers addressing an agenda item. Whenever we have students, regardless of what they have to say, we always put our students at the top of the agenda. I'm going to call the first 3 speakers. Please approach the podium, say your name, what school you go to, and you'll be timed after you are done doing that. So we'll start with Kelvin Roberts, Barry Johnson, and Reality Gray. Mr. Roberts.
Hello, thank you all. It's my honor to be here. Calvin Roberts, I'm a student at East High School. I am a junior.
Speaking to the mic, Mr. Roberts.
Sorry. I have been attending East High School since 7th grade. During this time, I have participated in student government, and I am also a member of the Teaching and Learning Institute, our magnet program. For future educators, I am an aspiring elementary teacher. When our school switched principals a year and a half ago, many of these positive things, especially our reputation, were lost in the transition. But at the same time, the school has also made some changes for the better, including having more communication between parents and teachers. I would like to see our school be restored to a level of excellence. We need to see drastic changes done to the school, from community building to better funding to a more relevant curriculum. I feel strongly that students must give input into how the district spends our money. Students should also have a legitimate decision-making power in policies and rules of the district. Most importantly, students need better preparation for serious careers like law, medicine, and engineering. If a student does not have a say in what they do, they feel like no one cares about their voice. Then they become rebellious because they feel the treatment they are receiving is incorrect and unjust. In our TLI education seminar at East, we created our own set of rules, and we all came to agreement. We have one simple rule: respect. Respect yourself, respect others, respect the environment. The district must learn to respect students by sharing the power to make decisions for the district. Without the students' power in decision-making, they feel like they do not own the policies, and changes made for the district will not have student support. Therefore, there will be less chance of success and less chance for the students to respect the rules and policies that are being enforced. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Barry Johnson.
Hi, my name is Barry C. Johnson. I'm a student at Shala High School. And for the past couple of years, well, since I started Shala High School, I was thinking that, well, how come we don't have a football team there? And every time I asked up, they gave me the same answer, because the school and the committee doesn't have enough money for it. But I was thinking that if we have enough players willing, well, enough students willing to play, maybe that the attendance rate will go up, and that the GPA pointage will get increased by a major amount. Mainly, the reason why I'm asking for it is because when I was going to Marshall to try to play football, they never gave me a chance to play at all. And, well, last year, my brother Barry Johnson and his best friend Dwayne Porche, they haven't got a chance to play that whole season. So I was thinking that if we have one for our school, maybe it'll get the kids that go to our school off the streets and into some classrooms so they can work harder, so they have something to look forward to. Right now, they all thinking that all they gotta do is just stay in the streets and hope that everything will get better. But they need to learn that that's not the answer for it. But the answer is staying in the class, doing your work, and you'll achieve a lot more. And I have signed petitions here of all the students, most of the students in Shala High School that are willing to play if we have one, if we have a football team at our school. And I know for a fact that their parents will be backing us up, and hopefully the neighborhood will be able to back us up on that same level. And That's it. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And I would also ask that you email the board. Commissioner Elliott is your liaison to Charlotte. If you want to reach out to her and the superintendent, Commissioner Elliott is up here. They can help. They can further assist you. Reality Gray and Daniel Sutton, is Reality here? I love that name. by the
Oh,
way.
they were supposed to come with me, but they had something else to do today.
Okay. So again, Mr. Johnson, let's follow up with the board, with your board member and superintendent. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Forgive me if I say your name wrong. Crescenzo Scipione? How do you say it?
Crescenzo Scipione.
Crescenzo Scipione, okay.
Hi, my name is Crescenzo Scipione. I'm a senior at School of the Arts and a member of Rochester Students for a Democratic Society. I wanted to make 2 points. My first one is about the superintendent's proposal to reverse the district's policy on releasing student directory information to military recruiters. I would first like to point out that the current policy has been in place since 2005, and for 3 years, the district has been non-compliant with No Child Left Behind. For 3 years, nothing has happened as a result of this. Federal funding has not been cut, nothing has changed. So it would seem like common sense to simply leave well enough alone and move on to more important issues, of which there are plenty. Superintendent, I'm not so sure about New York City, but in Rochester we have a rich legacy of moral courage in the face of unjust laws. Maybe you should comply with that. In 1850, Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Act. This law required the return of escaped slaves to their masters. The city chose to defy that law by making Rochester one of the most important stops on the Underground Railroad. They broke the law. They were non-compliant with the law because it was wrong. And today, we build monuments to those people. We name schools after them. To overturn the current recruitment information policy would betray the legacy of Frederick Douglass in this city by exposing students to unyielding harassment by recruiters who target poor students and students of color because they see them as vulnerable, hopeless, and easy to manipulate and deceive. I think what the superintendent and this board may be forgetting is that your first and foremost responsibility is not to a Marine recruiter, it is to the students of this city. As one of those students, I oppose any policy that gives a racist, homophobic, and predatory institution like the military greater access to my school. I hope that this board chooses integrity over cowardice.
Thank you, Mr. Scipione.
I'm not done.
Your time's up. Thank you. Aaron Shoemaker? Is Aaron here? Aaron Shoemaker? Jacob Spezio? Is Mr. Spezio here?
Hello, my name is Jacob Spezio. I'm a senior this year at School Without Walls and a member of Rochester Students for a Democratic Society. I think I can safely say that I represent the majority of School Without Walls students and parents who are opposed to reversing the current procedure that safeguards students' privacy and withholds their personal information from lying, coercive military recruiters. Furthermore, I would like to express my frustration and disgust toward the board members who seem to have forgotten that they represent the students. That's me and my peers, and not recruiters or the war machine. Thank you.
Thank you. Christopher Lind? Christopher Lind? Mr. Lind here? And Mr. Lind will be followed by Mary Adams.
The Rochester Parent Union is a family advocacy organization designed to act as an accessible resource to city school district families, listen and respond to the needs and views of the city school district families, and work collaboratively with the RTA and the RCSD administration. The Rochester Parent Union is disheartened and disappointed by recent events and conversation involving the proposed closing of School 14. First, the families of School 14 need more information regarding the closing of the school. At the January informational meeting, the central office asked attendees to write down questions which would be answered in due course. To date, families at School 14 do not have answers to the pressing questions regarding the displacement of their children. Tonight, you intend to vote on the proposition to close School 14 without first answering parent and family questions regarding what that will mean for displacing our students, continuation of special education and language services, as well as questions about keeping sibling groups intact. Second, the current plan to close School 14 calls to eliminate the UPK program and not replace it with another UPK classroom in a public school. The Rochester Parent Union insists that another UPK classroom open in a public school to replace the one that will be lost at School 14. The Rochester Parent Union believes that putting more UPK programs in public schools will help enrich our community through early education and intervention and early contact with district families. Third, on February 12th, the Board of Education Excellence and Student Achievement Committee met to hear the proposal from Superintendent Brizard and his team regarding the closing of School 14 and the opening of a new expeditionary learning school on St. Paul Street. A vast majority of School 14 families were not invited to the committee meeting. At the committee meeting, Commissioner Van White and his committee asked if the superintendent and his team had heard any concerns from parents of School 14 children. The superintendent and his team answered no to that question. At the informational meeting, a group of parents talked directly with school innovator Mary Doyle and told her that they had concerns about the plan to close School 14. There appears to be a grave breakdown in communication between the district administrators and the families of School 14. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mary Adams, is Ms. Adams here? Yes. Thank you. And Ms. Adams will be followed by Ricardo Adams.
Hi, I'm a parent of a city school, high school student, and I'm coming to speak in opposition to the proposed change to the military data access policy. According to this morning's newspaper, military recruiters did not seem to be challenging the existing district's current handling of student information, contrary to the claims that were brought up last week. So hopefully, all the people signed up to speak tonight, it's sort of a much ado about nothing. I'm hoping that the existing policy will actually be maintained if there really isn't a problem from the military's perspective. I want to talk from personal experience about serious problems that I see with the proposed changes. First, there will definitely be families who do not have their wishes honored in terms of protecting their kids' privacy. When we moved in 2007, it took the district almost a year of calls, emails, and notes to accomplish and address change with the district. I also know that even when forms are sent in, sometimes the school mixes things up. And of course, very few of us are completely infallible in terms of getting our own paperwork in, kids and parents. Second, military recruiters themselves are under tremendous pressure to increase their numbers, and they themselves are pressed to use psychological manipulation, deceitful promises, and nonstop pursuit of potential recruits. And I feel for them. I mean, there's been some recent press about the pressure that recruiters are under and a number of suicides among one recruiting station in Texas. So, you know, it's a systemic problem, and the thing is, I don't want my kid to suffer from that pressure. Our children deserve to be free from pressure from adults who are working under pressure to recruit them based on the adult's own guidelines, pressures, and self-interest. One of the other things we need to keep in mind is that our teenagers aren't always even-keeled with their ability to handle pressure. They might not be able to say no, even though they want to say no. And it's our responsibility as parents to make the decisions as to who they come in contact with, especially regarding something as serious as military recruitment.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Ricardo Adams.
Yeah, my name is Ricardo Adams. I'm a parent of a student in the city school district, and I have two up-and-coming kids that will be going to the city school district, and I just oppose that, reversing that decision. My kids get exposed to too much stuff as it is. I really don't need for them to be exposed to nothing else that I don't want them to be exposed to. I don't know how you may feel about the military, but I've been reading about they have record numbers of suicides and all of that. I don't want my kids to even have to, the odds is against my kids. And I just don't need them to be exposed. And I'm here to express that I wish you don't reverse a decision. That's what I'm here for.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. David Dornford. David Dornford. And David Dornford will be followed by Mr. Doug Noble.
Hello, I'm here as a veteran of the Vietnam War, a member of the Veterans for Peace, and military families speak out. My issue, whereas it has an implication of coercion through Congress in this act to have the stipulation in the No Child Left Behind Act at all, is unimaginable. It's coercive. I think for this board to comply with this, you would be complicit in coercion. It's simply that. I think we should listen to the students, carefully listen to these students. You serve them. You are supposed to serve them, listen to them. Their information should be their discretion, their parents' discretion, and my issue is with this board. You are trying to undo the policy you have, which is a policy that was agreed to in trust. The staff is not doing its job in informing us when recruiters come to schools as agreed. You're not doing your job that you've agreed to. Now you are ready to become complicit in a coercive policy. I strongly recommend against that for the sake of all these beautiful young children, including my son, who was wrongfully recruited. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug Noble. Doug Noble will be followed by Theodore Wilcox.
I'm Doug Noble. I want to share some background on the military recruitment language many of us are here to discuss, which was slipped into the federal education law in 2001 through the Vitter-Sessions Amendment. One sponsor was David Vitter, arch-conservative senator from Louisiana, later scandalized for frequenting D.C. Madam Call Girls. The other sponsor, Pete Sessions of Texas, was later identified as one of the 20 most corrupt members of Congress for his role in the Abramoff bribe scandals and his links to defense contractors. These are the architects of the law with which we are struggling so hard to comply. What of the law itself? Legal scholars have determined this section of the law to be unconstitutional for coercing students or parents to expose themselves publicly in unpopular opposition to high school military recruitment. A recent ACLU report has found that the section violates the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, a treaty ratified by the U.S. Senate, which protects against recruitment of child soldiers. Our own Louise Slaughter has co-sponsored a bill in Congress that will require parents' written consent for any disclosure of student information to recruiters, thereby changing the NCLB. All this provides a context for our immediate concerns tonight, which are two. One, the district has been in noncompliance with the NCLB, both by failing to send out parent consent forms and by sending incomplete information to recruiters. Two, the district is also in noncompliance with its board policy, first by failing to send parent consent letters with student emergency cards, and second by hurrying a consent letter to parents this January that reverses the board's policy. What to do? Monitoring noncompliance with this section of NCLB requires a lengthy, multi-step procedure at the highest levels of military and government before any funding losses, and I have found no instance anywhere of federal funding loss through this process, so there is little to fear. More serious to me is the district's noncompliance with its own board policy through a belated effort to rectify its own mistakes. The board policy on military recruitment was written carefully after substantial deliberation.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Noble.
it
That's your time.
courageously and defensively interprets the law. Any district effort to change its board policy must be done with an equivalent amount of informed deliberation. I must tell you that if you insist on a small-minded, knee-jerk compliance, prepare yourselves for a determined, disruptive defiance. Thank you.
Theodore Wilcox. Mr. Wilcox will be followed by Roger Griswold.
Hello, my name is Ted Wilcox, and my wife and I and our two little children arrived in Rochester about 42 years ago. Our two daughters graduated from East High School. We have two granddaughters here. One is just graduated from SOTA, and the other is still there. So we're invested vested, and we're thankful, actually, and want to say that to the district and the board for the good things that they've done for our family. However, I do have grave concerns concerning the recent debate on the district's privacy policy. It is common that when we are faced with it, it's common that we can be faced with a difficult decision which requires ignoring one law to obey another. A trivial example would be the need to run a red light in order to clear the way for a coming ambulance. As a civil rights, peace, anti-war activist, I thank the school board for the decision in 2005 to place privacy ahead of the NCLB provisions. It is gratifying that no civil agency has threatened Rochester or Fairport for their, quotes, breach of the NCLB Act. Could it be that it is recognized that the NCLB Act contains unconstitutional provisions? However, I see two instances where severe criticism is warranted. First, in our governmental system, thank goodness, the military is not directly involved in the enforcement of law. In the paper this morning, the Marine who called the district seemed to claim that only to have wanted complete information on students who had opted in. That seems highly unlikely, as that would, or should, not have caused the reaction of the superintendent in January. Thus, I believe the earlier reports that he inappropriately threatened the district with retaliation are likely to be true. However, if he had a problem with the policy, it can be forwarded along the chain of command and brought to the attention of a civilian agency, which can determine what, if anything, should be done.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox.
And I contacted Representative Slaughter and would suggest you two too.
Thank you. Roger Griswold, followed by Thomas Gregory. I'm sorry, Roger Griswold, followed by Gary Puda.
I'm here as the president of the Vets for Peace organization here in Chapter 23 in Rochester. And along with my fellow chapter members, we oppose the changing of the law. As a former military veteran, a veteran of Vietnam, I know the coercion that a lot of students and a lot of people have been under to fill these positions within the military. And I feel that the school board has enough responsibility to protect the students and not give up further information that could be used as a detrimental action towards their lives. Everybody that's been in the military realizes the fact that when you get into the military, there's only one purpose, and that's to defend your country and to kill somebody else, and that's not what the school is supposed to do. We're not to provide that information to the students. I hope you do not reverse this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Puda? Is Gary here? Gary will be followed by Thomas Gregory.
Good evening, Superintendent, President Evans, honorable members of the board. My name is Gary Pudup. I'm the chapter director of the Genesee Valley chapter of the New York Civil Liberties Union. I represent 2,000 members in the Rochester area. These are members of the union, their parents, their family members, their residents of Rochester. Our concern is with the privacy issues of this matter. That includes the right of a parent and their child to make an informed decision about whether they want their personal information turned over to the government. This is not a judgment on the choice a person makes, but a judgment on the degree and extent about how well that person has been advised about the ability to make that choice. The current policy of the Rochester City School District is held up as an example of a model policy that balances the legitimate needs of the nation to have a competent military against the privacy rights of the children in the care of the district. The policy is a good balance between facilitating contact between students contemplating a military service career and those who wish to exercise, as Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis put it, the most comprehensive of rights, the most valued by civilized man, the right to be left alone. Before we change a policy that works, that is balanced, that meets everyone's needs, that is respected as a model policy, let's take a moment, let cooler heads prevail, and think this out. In our letter to each of you and to the superintendent, we detail why the current policy in fact complies with No Child Left Behind. We argue that the policy is not in violation is not altogether clear. No Child Left Behind is entirely silent on what type of procedure must be used to compile this list of information. Congress has left it to the school to decide how they want to compile requested directory information. The law does not specify whether schools are to presume that parents want the information released at all. All that is required is that they do not deny such a request. Let us not be anxious to fix something that is not broken. On behalf of the membership, I ask the board and superintendent to please keep the policy as it is and implement it as it is. Thank you. Good night.
Thomas Gregory. Mr. Gregory will be followed by Robin Murray.
My name is Thomas Gregory. I'm here as a citizen representing myself. I'm not here in any official capacity. I'm a former service Marine, and I work as a volunteer training older men who are returning into service. They stick them with the old man, and I try to run them into shape. I'm a graduate of Cornell University. Right there, what I'm giving you there, is, with permission, is an invitation. It's a Marine Corps Educator's Guide with an invitation for any member of the board or any assignee that would like to go down to the Educators Workshop held in Paris Island for 4 days in April. And so you can see something a little bit more about what the Marine Corps and about what our military service is all about. I've been with the command as a volunteer since my son enlisted in the United States Army. That was about three and a half years ago now. We were in the process of losing our child to the streets. Familiar story, broken home, the whole works. Son out there riding bicycles. All of a sudden, Major Curtis Harper. I had a conversation with him. I was able to get our son in the United States military. My son's being educated. My son has health care. My son has a job. My son has training, and he has a future should he decide not to go 20 years and come out for employment, because he has habits that will benefit him as a civilian. I know the recruiters. I work with them almost every day. I stop by and say hello. I have people who I'm assigned to basically train from time to time. Their concern for the students and for the people who they want to bring into this environment is one directed toward education as well as training, health care, all the benefits that I think any responsible parent in this room would want to see their child have. This is not a numbers game, as I've heard, and we're not creating killers. What we are, we're creating citizens for tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Mr. Gregory. Thank you. Robin Murray. Robin Murray will be followed by Brian Kassler.
Hello, everyone. My name is Robin Murray. I'm a former sergeant in the United States Army, and I'm in opposition to you changing the policy about recruitment in your schools. I'm here with a fact. Joint Advertising and Marketing Research Committee, or study. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's a program envisioned and executed by the military. It is essentially an advertising machine. It is officially a division of the Pentagon, which was created in 2000 in an effort to boost recruitment numbers. In June 2005, the Pentagon issued a privacy notice to say it had bought the right to the following information from all high school and college students: Social Security numbers, age, email, home address, telephone numbers, school year, grade point average, ethnicity, ASVAB results, and subject studies. This data is kept separate from the information collected by the military under the No Child Left Behind Act. This means that the military is collecting extremely sensitive information not once, but twice. Some 12 million students and 20 million young adults, ages 18 to 37, have profiles that are officially military property and can be accessed by the military at any time. Military recruiters work on quota, just like some other salesmen. They work long hours and face little to no promotion opportunities. Often the way for them to achieve a higher rank is meritorious advancement. Quota also determines their and your young son or daughter's job. When certain standards are not met, soldiers face punishment and threaten to ruin their careers or separate time from their loved ones, which in turn motivates them to recruit more people. Now, about truth in recruitment in the Army that I joined. 28% of all women report being raped while in the service. 5.6% of people who enter the GI Montgomery bill use all the money available to them. 75% of African Americans and 67% of Latinos report experiencing racial prejudice in the service.
Thank you. That's your time. Thank you. Brian Kassler, followed by another Brian Linzo.
Good evening, Rochester City School Board members. My name is Brian Kassler, and in preparing for tonight, I read about this board's debate around the opt-out, opt-in policy. I've heard board members compare the military service with other professions, and I have something to say about that. As a Marine veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, serving 3 combat tours, I would like to point out differences we all must acknowledge. You don't sign up at 17 to become a police officer. You don't sign an 8-year contract to work at Office Max. And most importantly, schools don't give away our children's private information without their explicit permission. For those who still defend the military as a good career right now, let's look at some opportunities your students might have. Last year, 128 Army soldiers committed suicide, but over 2,100 soldiers attempted it. Last month alone, the Army had 24 suicides. That's more than combat-related deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. This month, the Pentagon just announced that 13,000 stop-loss soldiers will have to wait 5 months to receive their stop-loss bonuses. 1 in 3 female service members report cases of military sexual trauma, and in 2007, this meant 2,688 reported cases. This issue is not about being for or against our military. It's about providing Rochester's next generation with a choice free of predatory recruiting tactics, free from an invasive opt-out policy, and instead filled with hope and opportunity. The greatest and most powerful gift our children have is their futures. Don't give it up to these recruiters without a fight.
Thank you. Brian Linzo. Brian Linzo will be followed by Ken Braley.
Hi, my name is Brian. I'm also a member of the Rochester community, and I hope someday to actually send my children to the city schools. I'm also here to speak against a proposed change in the policy. It seems unnecessary given the information people have brought on. If there is a direct threat to the school's funding, I say present it so we may see it in the day of light. So far, all we've heard is pressure from a branch that doesn't actually in charge of administering and executing the laws, merely executing our foreign policy. And I think we need to see that evidence if it exists. And I think also in the timing of it seems quite cynical. In a time where our economy is going into the tank and corporations are leaving, we're inviting the military in the front door and saying, this is your job opportunity. I don't think it's right to give the only opportunities to our students is a military career. I think we need to do a lot more, and it's maybe beyond the purview of this board to offer them more opportunities, but I think the change in this policy, the timing of it seems quite cynical. This is a time of hope and a time of crisis, and I think we need to act in accordance with what students need, their options. It seems completely unnecessary to offer up their information without their consent. And there's no lack of opportunities to join the military. There's a recruiter station with almost a block from here, commercials all over. There's no lack of opportunity. What we want is privacy and the rights of parents who haven't responded to actually have their wishes honored and be contacted until their wishes are honored, not just given up automatically to the military. I think we owe this to our students, and I think this board ought to stand up for the rights of its students and not the intentions of the military. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Braley. Ken Braley will be followed by Julia Fairchild.
Hi, my name is Ken Braley. I'm also a veteran of the U.S. Army. I would like to start off by thanking the board for their previous position of opt-in that has been for the last few years, and I urge that no changes be made. I wish that my high school had a similar policy about giving my private contact information to anyone. I'm not here to argue that nobody should join the military. It can be a good opportunity for many people. However, I would like to offer my experience as to how it is not often the best choice. In my senior year of high school, I had received a $42,000 academic scholarship offer from Clarkson University. I had no intention or interest at all in military service. I was 17 years old when I was called at home by an Army recruiter. I agreed to meet with him, and he did his job well. He convinced a young, impressionable person that his interests were aligned with my best interests. I will not go into the details of how I was convinced, but I will say that I was lied to. Even if the recruiter had been completely truthful, I had no idea what I was getting into. At 17 years old, I had signed away the next 8 years of my life. It was less than a year into my service when I realized that I did not want to be in the military. Unfortunately, the military is not a career like many others that we've compared them to. You can't just quit. At this time, I called my younger brother, who is also in the delayed entry program at 17. I told him about my experiences so far with the military, and he decided that he no longer wanted to enlist. He told his recruiter of his decision, and the recruiter told him that he would face jail time if he did not go. Some may know that this is a lie, but unfortunately my brother did not, and continued with his enlistment paperwork to avoid prosecution. Unfortunately, my experience and my brother's experience are very common. The military recruiter's job is not to help a student figure out what is best for them. Their job is to reach their recruitment goals. If the school board decides to keep the opt-in policy, students will still have the option to join the military. Nobody wants to deny them of their choice, but the opt-out policy would result in more...
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Burley. Julia Fairchild. Is Julia Fairchild here? Okay. One last speaker, Patricia Schmidt. Is she here? Patricia Schmidt here? Okay. You will be our last speaker.
School board. I didn't really come prepared with a speech. I've been here before and spoke for the military. I am a mother of 4 children in the military, and they're in their 20s and 30s. Some have decided to make careers. None of my children went into war zones, and you really can't determine that when they're going in. I have never had a bad experience with a recruiter. I was there through most of it, as every parent should be. So when young kids are standing up here going into anti-war websites and anti-military websites and quoting you statistics that aren't true.
Out of order. Out of order. Out of order. Do not interrupt in this meeting, please.
I urge everyone to go on the true websites with facts, go into a recruiter, talk to them. My children not only serve in the military, but they help in the community. They've helped with Katrina. My daughter's a nurse. She is in San Antonio, Texas, where the military serves a third of that area. Traumas that can only be flown in or brought in by ambulance. 4 children, no crisis. 3 girls, never been raped. You can, high suicide rates, there's high suicide rates with teenagers, with financial advisors. You can't judge the military if you don't exactly know what you're talking about. And if you're not going along with federal law, what message are you sending to your children that you don't have to follow the law? Whether it's a school board law or a federal law, follow the law. Try to change the law. Those people in the background, I commend them. We're here because they're not only recruiters in the military, they're enlisted men, so we can stand up here and talk about this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schmidt. That concludes our speakers. We will now move to item number 5 on the agenda, which is the superintendent's report.
Okay, Commissioners, I'm going to ask you that you go to the front, but before you do, for our presentation on our special ed report, I want to first congratulate the parents who were elected, parents and community members who were elected to the parent/, Community Council, and they'll be recognized at a future meeting. So thank you again for participating in that. So if I can ask commissioners to go to the front, we have a presentation on the special ed report. While we are setting up, I'm not sure if you can hear me or not, last year when I walked into the district, we talked about doing a number of different audits. One was to look at the state of special education in our district. We knew that without tackling that issue, we would never raise achievement to the levels that we want to raise it to. Given the number of our special needs students who are being suspended, clearly that's the highest number in our district, being cited by the state in a number of different areas for suspension for special ed students. When you look at the graduation rate and the achievement of students with disabilities in our district, we knew this was something we had to take on. So we asked the council of the great city schools to come in and audit and tell us what to do in terms of moving this agenda forward. So the individuals who came here are experts in the field with a combined over 140 years of experience in special education. And by the way, this was done at no cost to the district, $0. It was paid for by the council and by the Broad Foundation. With that, I'll turn this over to Kirsten Barkley, who was the liaison and the person who actually helped us put this together. Thank you.
Good evening. As you know, the Council of Great City Schools recently released its report entitled Improving Special Education in the Rochester City Schools. There are over 6,500 students with disabilities in Rochester, and they have the lowest graduation and the highest dropout rate of any subgroup. At the request of the superintendent, the council conducted a comprehensive program review at no cost to the district. The council's strategic team was made up of senior special education managers from large urban school districts throughout the country. Our work with the council began in late August. We provided the team with hundreds of documents and data sets. In mid-September, the team spent 4 days in Rochester interviewing the superintendent, his staff, special and general educators, parents, advocates, administrators, and Commissioner Elliott. The team spent an afternoon then debriefing us about some of its preliminary findings, and that provided a framework for us to begin some of our work. The council's report includes over 80 key findings, and it gives the district 35 major recommendations for special education reform. Some of the team's findings were positive. For example, it found that most district staff are committed to including students with disabilities in the general education setting. Staff also recognized the need to improve instruction for these children. It credited the development of the Leadership Academy, designed to improve leadership skills and capacity of current and future principals. And it found that the new Rochester curriculum, which focuses not on compliance, but on accelerating student achievement, with laying a foundation for good first teaching and building accountability. The team also pointed to the district's integrated special class model as a great program for increasing inclusiveness. Integrated special classes increase the amount of time that many of our special education students spend in general education classes with their non-disabled peers. It felt that the Great Beginnings program is an excellent model for accelerating literacy and improving vocabulary among kindergarten, first, and second graders in the district. and it pointed out that parents of students with disabilities want very much to work with the district as partners and not adversaries in the CSE process. Of the Council's 80 findings, 46 of them were in areas of concern. The report's 35 recommendations comprehensively address each of the areas of concern and are broken down into these 5 categories. You'll see throughout the recommendations that areas of work that we have already started are marked with an asterisk. The first group of recommendations focus on reorganizing central office's special education department. The team felt that special education needed strong leadership, and that leadership should have a voice in policy-level decisions. Our new executive director, Linda Blankenhorn, joined Teaching and Learning in December, and her background working for the New York State Department of Education in special education makes her an outstanding choice to head that department. Now, the overall goal of the reorganization is to have program and compliance expertise that supports schools. There will be 3 zone directors that focus on instruction and compliance within each school in their zone. These directors will report to Ms. Blankenhorn and will report indirectly to the school chiefs. Another step in the decentralization will be to hold all CSE meetings at schools. As you know, many CSE meetings are held downtown, which means that the staff who regularly work with the students do not fully participate in the CSE process. In coming years, all CSE meetings will be at buildings, and they will be led by staff who know the children and their families best. The second category of the report's findings and recommendations, leadership and accountability, policy, procedures, and data. The team felt that the principles' evaluations should include targets that are specific to special education. For example, targets for graduation and suspension rates should be incorporated into their evaluations. It found the district lacking in written procedures to govern the delivery of special education services, and it recommended developing procedures that clearly delineate who's responsible for delivering each service. The team also expressed significant concern over the lack of readily available data and the use of data to drive informed decision-making. We're beginning to assess our special education software, IEP Direct, to determine the extent to which it will be able to meet our needs as we go forward. Some of the most important work that we will do will be in the area of program development and instruction. The report repeatedly focuses on a lack of a comprehensive model for response to intervention, or RTI. A good RTI model provides screening for all students to identify those who are in need of intervention, a systemic framework for research-based interventions, progress monitoring, and performance indicators. Most importantly, RTI includes system-wide training to address academic and behavioral issues that are right now driving a significant increase in student referrals for special education. Immediately after the debriefing in September, the Division of Teaching and Learning made this initiative a priority. Marilyn Patterson's grant group is very close to adopting a research-based model for RTI, and they're planning significant professional development for the summer. In addition, Ms. Grant's group has started to transform the way its curriculum leaders think about the specific needs of students with disabilities in learning. Going forward, we also need to focus on providing differentiated instruction in general education classrooms. But our most critical task right now is to develop and implement programs that are research-based and that rely on specially designed instruction to allow children to progress toward graduation. The council also found significant inequities in special education populations amongst the schools in the district. It recommended a phased-in strategic plan to ensure that all schools, including those with admissions criteria, have proportionate shares of students with disabilities. As part of that plan, we need to build systems that keep students in their home school or their school of choice, even when their programs change. And finally, we're working on developing new programs for higher needs children so that we can provide appropriate in-district placements to more students. Much of the work ahead will be in improving the capacity of administrators and teachers. The council found that general and special educators would welcome professional development. We're creating a PD plan so that we can improve accountability and successfully implement the new programs that we develop. We also need to recognize this area's expertise that's available to us, often at little or no cost to the district. We're beginning to partner with area colleges and community-based organizations that have the capacity to provide more effective professional development in some very specific areas, such as autism. The council was struck by how willing our parents are to work with us, and I can tell you that this is not always the case in school districts. It was recommended that we focus on improving our communication with parents of students with disabilities. Also, parents and advocates expressed concern that we over-identify students based on race. The team found that overall, we do not have a disproportionate number of students receiving special education based on race or ethnicity. However, they noted that our data cannot tell us whether within special education we have over-identified certain specific groups of programs. We're doing that analysis internally right now. So the council's report has helped us frame what it is we have to do. But the immediate question for us now is, how do we do it? We've mapped out a strategic plan that will be rolled out in 3 phases. First, we must build a foundation to support our schools. Our central office team will be comprised of agile, highly specialized staff who function as a team under strong leadership. Their mission will be to support schools, and their success will be measured by student performance and not compliance. Their initial work will focus on building effective programs and instructional models and implementing those programs in schools. At the same time, we'll improve our principals' capacity to empower them to implement effective and sustainable changes in their buildings for students with disabilities. We'll then focus on building school capacity. We will provide significant professional development for general education teachers, special education teachers, and administrators in areas such as discipline and differentiated instruction. We need to commit to a district-wide adoption of positive behavioral supports that will reduce suspensions for all students, including those with disabilities. As we build capacity, we'll be better able to engage our parents in the CSE process and help them learn how to develop IEPs for their children. We will also redistribute special education programs amongst our schools, increase the types of services and programs we offer, and ensure that the programs are effectively accelerating student achievement. Once that foundation has been laid, we will be able to hold staff accountable for the achievement of students with disabilities. Once program models are built and implemented, student outcomes will be constantly monitored, and the programs will be adjusted to meet the specific needs of those children. Special education programs will be aligned with the Rochester curriculum so that the achievement gap for this subgroup will close, and we'll begin to see higher graduation and lower dropout rates. As you can see, the special education work plan is aligned with the superintendent's overall strategic framework for accelerating achievement for all students. In concluding its report, the council felt that the district could be one of the best urban school districts in the country, and that special education programs could also be among the best. While implementation and results will take time, there is every reason to believe that those results can be forthcoming for our children. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Barkley. Is Ms. Blickenhorn in the audience? Can you stand up? It's our new Executive Director for Specialized Services. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Mr. Superintendent, are there any other items on your report?
No, this concludes my report.
Thank you. Briefly, members of the board, and I mean briefly, are there questions for the superintendent regarding the special education report that you just saw? I'll start on my left. Commissioner Elliott.
I want to thank the superintendent for getting this report done by the Council of Great City Schools. I know that this was an area that I was really disheartened about. I happened to sit in on I was asked by a parent to sit in on one of the hearings. And if you may recall, I think it was last year that I reported that I left that meeting being twisted. Because there were probably about 10 people, and then there was a parent. And the facility that it was in, it was tight corners, and it appeared, it seemingly was, not seemingly, it was, where the finger was getting pointed at this parent. And I left there, and it was tense, and I left there with the feeling that these people did not have a caring bone in their body when it came to the parents. And so I'm glad that, Mr. Superintendent, you are working on this issue. For me, it's particularly about black males being disproportionately put in special education. So I'd like to, when the report comes, that we are not disproportionately putting our, particularly black males in that program. I'd like to be able to see that. But the question that I have, is that system that I just talked about, is that going to be eliminated?
The answer is yes. The fact that we're going to be moving those kinds of meetings to the school level, you're going to have teachers and administrators who work with these students directly. Right now, too often, you have folks who are looking at files, looking at folders, and making decisions perhaps remotely. With this model, much of this will be happening at the school level with people who work with kids on a regular basis.
Who care for kids?
Without question.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I saw Commissioner Williams' hand.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. And Mr. Superintendent, going through the report, they talked about the new organization, or the organization chart. So you have an executive director, and the executive director will then have 3 zone chiefs, and each zone chief will then have a data clerk, an administrator, and I think an analyst. A data clerk, administrator, and a data analyst. So it gives the impression you're going to have this sort of exponential growth in the size of the staff. But when I look at the numbers itself in terms of the staff, the current staff in special ed, I come up with something like almost 1,400 or 1,500. So that includes, and I don't know how you count it, includes the teachers, the paraprofessionals, the speech and language specialists, the psychologists, the social workers, the nurses, the occupational therapists, and the physical therapists. So now how will this new organization change in terms of personnel, if any? I mean, will it get larger, smaller? or what?
Well, talking strictly, and Kirsten, you can add to this if you'd like, talking strictly to the administrative level, the central level, we're not looking to increase the numbers at all. In fact, the numbers essential, correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, will remain exactly the same. And right now, we're negotiating with ASAW to make that happen. Special ed, as you probably know, is the most heavily staffed kind of program in this country. In some schools, we have as many as 4 adults to 8 kids in some of our classrooms. When you look at the expense nationally, it is a very expensive model and one that doesn't always provide the kinds of academic achievement that we hope to have. But the fact is, because we have a budget issue and because we have a need to right size, we're not looking to increase numbers. You want to add, Kristen?
No, I would say that the other council, the council's findings also included information about how fragmented the responsibilities are within the current central office organizational structure. And so when we've drafted the reorganization structure, Commissioner, we've aligned those responsibilities so that we don't have people responsible for doing 100 different things. They can focus on their job and move forward with just that work.
In fact, there's a line in the report, if I remember correctly, that says that we've got so many people now, especially in the district, not just the central office, but in the district, it creates confusion. So it is our aim to not just streamline, but also to reduce where we can. But we have to do this with the cooperation of our bargaining units.
Okay, and then one last question. In going through the report itself, there seems to be a heavy emphasis on just sort of structure. In terms of the new organizational structure, the procedures, the policies, but very little in terms of either effectiveness or outcomes. So what are we looking at in terms of, what kind of metrics are we looking at that we're trying to achieve as a result of this new reorganization?
Well, I think that the basic premise of the reorganization of central office will be to build into those department members' evaluations, metrics that include student performance outcomes. Those are not part of what they're evaluated on right now, and so there is no direct connection between student achievement and the work being done at central office.
If I may add to that, Commissioner, the fact is, when you look at how most people are evaluated, very often you find leaders who don't understand special ed focus strictly on gen ed kids and tend to push off the special needs kids to either a teacher in charge or an assistant principal in charge. When we talk about achievement, I think it's important that we hold everyone accountable for every single student. So if you saw in the report, in the presentation, we talked about performance measures. So putting targets for schools, not just to say that only the gen ed kids will be achieving a 75% graduation rate, but to push that all kids will be increasing based on where they are and look at the value add and push people to certain benchmarks. So we strive to make sure that we're going to hold leaders and everyone else who work with kids and working at central office accountable to student achievement, all students' achievement.
Thank you. Commissioner Powell.
If I could follow up on that point, how much does, to what extent does student performance outcomes explain the behavior over the years of moving students with disabilities out of their home schools and into dumping grounds?
I think that student performance, I think behavior is one factor in that. But I also think that we don't have a very flexible continuum of services. In other words, principals in their buildings do not have the flexibility to amend students' programs to offer services that are available in those buildings that would allow the child to stay in that building. So I'll give you a concrete example. A student in a 12-1-1 special class who is accelerating in math may not be able to go to general education or advanced placement math classes because of our rigid continuum.
And what are we going to change? In that exact example, what is going to change to make that work for that student?
Our continuum will be revamped so that that principal can say, This child is, the CSE has recommended that this child is in a 12-1-1 program, but for math class, the child will be able to go and participate with non-disabled peers in advanced placement classes. They'll have the flexibility to do that within their own building.
And will that continue to be true if, for instance, that student with disabilities has disruptive behavior or the kinds of attributes that get them put into a 12-1-1 instead of an integrated classroom?
Well, coupled with this work, I think one of the slides noted that we are looking at adopting a district-wide positive behavioral support model. And once you build those models, and in our schools where we have those models, we see extraordinary low rates of referrals for discipline. We see lower rates of referrals for students for initial classification to the Committee on Special Education. And we also see general staff, better satisfaction amongst our staff in those buildings and their jobs.
And if I may add, one thing we need to make clear, and we talk about this often in our cabinet meetings, is that PBS is not a special ed initiative. It is a school-wide, system-wide initiative for all students. The same way RTI, Response to Intervention, is not a special ed initiative. It's one for all students. And special ed designation is the last, final intervention. For too many of our schools, special ed is the first intervention, and we need to change that radically. So there's a changing culture, capacity, and this is why Ms. Barkley talked quite a bit about the capacity building, professional development of our staff, and the stimulus package that just came through with IDEAs could provide the funds that we need to actually push this kind of work forward.
One follow-up, Commissioner Powell.
On slightly different tack, as you know, a big focus of mine is getting students with disabilities the opportunity to stay in their home school or to stay in the school of their choice, wherever that's practical. And I saw some positive things in the report, in the PowerPoint about that, starting with putting the hearings in the schools and with the commitment, page 6, the commitment to keep students with disabilities in their home school. Questions about what the countervailing forces are. How will that impact FTE ratio of the FTEs? Are we going to have to hire more people to make that happen? Or are we going to be able to do that with the people we have? And secondly, are there building capacity impacts? If does that put more, say, 12-1-1 classrooms into a building that doesn't have the room to spread out and create another classroom of that nature?
With response to the first part of your question, I think we are not, I'll go back to the example I gave of the 12-1-1 student who could participate in an advanced placement math course. Many of our high schools have advanced placement math courses. That student would just go to that class. He wouldn't need additional staff to accompany him or to that class. With respect to the second part of your question, there's a lot of countervailing forces when we look at buildings that are maxed out in terms of physical space capacity. But at the end of the day, we have the exact same number of students. And so we move special education students around quite a bit. The purpose of the council's recommendation to have a phased-in plan to address that problem is so that students aren't, general education or special education students, aren't moved in 4th grade out of their building, but perhaps are we phase that plan in over a 6-year period so that we see some equalization over an extended period of time.
That response does argue in favor of operating our school buildings at an 80% capacity instead of allowing our highly chosen schools to be loaded up at 100% capacity, because then you don't have the ability to respond to a child who's already been assigned there, has served their first K through 3 at that building, and then suddenly he's got an IEP. There's no space to put this child. And so kind of, as a district, violate our commitment to the parent that says, the child can stay in that building until they reach the other end of the terminus grade level. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last comments or questions for the superintendent? I'll just say thank you for the report. Look forward to seeing the outcomes. I know special education is a very expensive enterprise in this district, and it's important that we do it correctly. So thank you for the report and the hard work of your staff.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to board committee standing reports.
Excuse me, President Evans?
Yes.
I had a brief question about the superintendent's report.
Oh, yes,
Wait,
Commissioner Brennan?
It's just about an omission and just a little clarification here. Do we anticipate that later in the agenda, the issue of the military recruitment policy will arise?
Yes, under new business, the commissioner will bring it up.
Thank you.
We'll move on with board reports, and we will begin with our student representative, Mr. Loss.
Good evening. Let me first say that I'm sorry. My apologies go out to me not being able to attend Tuesday's celebration, and tonight I was at the U of R getting my study on. And tonight when I go home, I need to finish my paper on Malcolm X. So before I go any further, I just want to take a moment and recognize the fact that this is Black History Month, and I have learned something new doing this paper on Malcolm X, and there are several individuals that make me smile, and every month I think we can give grace to everybody in every race because everybody has something to bring to the table. With that said, I have several role models in this country, in the state, here in this district, and I told these two women that I would not be long with my speech to them, but these two women have been really great to me. One I've been close with for about 5 years, and the other one I have recently known for a couple of years. I've worked with her in several projects, and these two women just go above and beyond in their jobs. They are very dedicated to their role of children in the Rochester City School District, and they do their job very phenomenal, and they're very patient with me and understanding and always there. These two women I'd like to recognize are Michelle Hancock and Marilyn Patterson-Grant. Thank you. My second family. The next announcement I'd like to make is June 5th. Please mark your calendars. Wilson Magnet High School's National Honor Society will be hosting the 5K run and walk for nonviolence. Sign-ups are soon. The money that is raised will go to the Center for Youth for a nonviolence training for youth at risk. I highly encourage you to sign up. I know I will be there because this is to support nonviolence as what we try to diminish in our city. The next announcement is the Prism Leadership Competition will be tomorrow at RIT starting at 5:15. Many of our city school students are involved, and this is great because it gives our students a name and a face. We are able to pick a minority or a woman who has contributed to math and science of their generation, so I welcome you to that. Moving on, SLC was very successful this month, and last month we went on our first projects. Last month, February 11th, SLC attended Blessed Sacrament supper program where I volunteer once a month. We were able to serve many different kinds of people, food, and from washing dishes to serving the meals and cleaning up. The students enjoyed that, and we are looking forward to going back. Yesterday, we joined a bunch of kids, newborns to 8- and 9-year-olds, at Wilson Commencement Park for some reading and activities and games. Look forward to pictures being on the district website. Our next meeting is March 18th. And I welcome you, and we are trying to do a service project before then. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Loss. Vice, I'm going to start with Commissioner Brennan and the board governance.
There is no report except that Commissioner Evans and I had a very nice afternoon Saturday over coffee, and it was a wonderful conversation, but it was in anticipation of tabulating the evaluation forms, which are under the purview of the governance committee. So if those of you who have forgotten could turn them into Commissioner Evans as soon as possible, I'm sure he would appreciate it, and we would move forward with that business. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a stack here if commissioners want to add to that. Commissioner Campos and the CIGR committee.
The CIGR committee, we met on Tuesday, February 24th, and we discussed the proposed 2009 legislative agenda. We were able to flush a lot out of it, and we will be meeting on March 19th at 5 o'clock so that we can approve that, so that we can be able to bring it to the board for the next business meeting. We also were able to receive an update on the facilities modernization program, just to give everyone an idea as to what the timeline is. The program manager's selection is due for the summer. Draft projects, the goal is to be identified by late fall. The public input process is slated to start January 2010, and finally being able to dig the hole in the ground will be 2011, so that everyone knows what the timeline is. And also, I just wanted to also say that I was able to attend the groundbreaking for the Edison Careers in Construction, and it was absolutely phenomenal. The students are so excited, and on top of that, they're going to actually start building the foundation of the house in an airplane hangar. Is that what it is? At Edison. And then they're going to actually take it to one of the properties in the city. So they're going to be building a house. So, and the students are just absolutely elated and excited. So it was a great event. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, and I'm happy to hear that the first nail will happen in 2011. That's the end of my second term, and I remember legislation going in like 2004. So that will be bittersweet to see our schools being modernized. Commissioner Elliott and the Policy Committee.
The Policy Committee, I don't think I reported the January meeting, and I think because it was after the board meeting, but the Policy Committee met in January to discuss a number of things, and one being the military policy. In that group, it was voted down, of which I've recommended that it come to the Committee of the Whole for further discussion, and so the Committee of the Whole met this month, a discussion around the military policy, and we will have further conversation under new business in regards to that.
Thank you. Vice President White and the Excellence in Student Achievement Committee.
There you go. Good evening, Mr. President. The Excellence in Student Achievement Committee met on Thursday, February 12th at 5:30 to discuss the proposal to phase out school number 14 and the proposal for what is now being called, at this time, the new school. The committee reviewed Resolution 637, which is the phase out of number 14 school, and Resolution 638, which will establish the new school. The Excellence in Student Achievement Committee requested additional information on the transition process so the rights and privileges of parents at number 14 could be adequately taken into account. My understanding is this information was provided to the board in its last board packet. The committee recommends that the full board approve Resolution 637 and 638. Next month's Excellence in Student Achievement Committee meeting will take place on Thursday, March 12th at 5:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President White. Commissioner Powell and the Finance Committee.
Could I ask for clarification on that last? Is this, the 637 and 638 are then adds to our resolution packet? Is that correct? I'm looking at the memo February 29, explanations of adds and changes to the resolutions. Is that?
I see 637 as approval to phase out 14, and 638 is submission of documents required to register new school. Those weren't in the original packet?
Well, I'm just asking because we have this memo from February 20th. I just need to put this in perspective.
Kim? I believe there were 637, 638, there was the memo from February 20th. I believe those were already in the packet. It says there were additions, but the memo says there were additions. There were not additions.
So the memo is incorrect?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe so.
I couldn't make sense of what you just said in light of what's on this
memo.
Okay.
memo, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. And the finance report.
Okay, finance report, yes. Finance committee met Thursday, February 19. We reviewed the financial reports and the student activity reports. We recommend approval of both. The finance reports are also include budget amendments, which are resolutions 620 and 630. We can vote on those in the regular course of events, but I would like to submit a motion for the board to accept the financial reports.
There's a motion on the table by Commissioner Powell to accept the Finance Committee annual financial reports. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Vice President White. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the financial report dated February 11, 2009, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you, Commissioner Powell.
And also would advance a motion to approve the student activity funds report.
Motion made by Commissioner Powell to accept the Student Activities Funds Report for the second quarter. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Elliott. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you, Commissioner Powell.
Okay, the remainder of my report refers to the resolutions that came before the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee did approve all the resolutions that were presented to us, approved them for, I beg your pardon, that's not correct. The committee voted to advance with its recommendation resolutions 620, 626, and 626 through 630. Resolutions 621 through 625 are all educational facilities resolutions. If I'm not mistaken, these are all new contracts as opposed to final payments. Can someone confirm that for me? And this year's award of the CIP. In other words, essentially last year's CIP, when we approved with the budget, the schools that were on that list, the bids were put out for those construction projects, in part because the Finance Committee was only had a quorum, did not have all three of its members. The vote was split, 1 yes and 1 no, so these are being forwarded without recommendation. But they are consistent with our capital improvement plan as voted on last year. The next Finance Committee meeting will be March 19th at 5:30 p.m., and that concludes my report.
Thank you. And Commissioner Powell, can you just touch on the busy season that's getting ready to come up a little bit about budget cycle?
Yes, you'll find on the dais in front of you a 2-page memo that outlines all of the important dates that you need to be cognizant of. The first that we're going to see of this year's budget will be on Monday, March 30th, a special meeting where Superintendent Broussard will present the budget to us.
You ready?
I'm sorry?
No.
Oh, I thought I said something wrong. I'm sorry. After which, we have 2 public hearing dates, one of which will be both the Contract for Excellence and a regular public hearing on the budget, and a series of 3 deliberations with their respective dates for submission of questions and due dates for the administration to respond to those. So all of those dates are detailed in the memorandum. Might want to post that in a conspicuous place next to your telephone or something. This is a different budget in that this is the first, actually I'll let the superintendent speak to this.
I was going to.
You look eager.
Absolutely. It should prove to be an exciting few months. We're about to begin to roll out the financial redesign for the system. Last year, we talked about tracing every dollar and beginning to push a school-based budgeting model. So this is the first iteration of a multi-year process and begin to devolve the power back to the schools. So the folks closest to the kids are the ones who are spending the money and spending the way they see fit, as long as they follow our rules and regulation. So it'll be a more transparent budget system. You see what schools have control of and what exists in each school in the district, and one really that will begin to provide the kind of empowerment that school-based people need to have. So it should prove to be an exciting few months for us.
Thank you.
And I want to thank really John Scanlon and Josh Martelli who are here, who've been sort of pushing this work forward.
Thank you, thank you. And I'll just remind my colleagues with the budget, the time to give your input is not after the sausage has already been made, but while the sausage is being made. So these deliberations are very important, and I would, if colleagues have budget alternatives, things they don't want to see in there, things they want to see in there, the time to do that is during these next 2 months. So thank you. Commissioner Williams in the Audit Committee.
Yes, Mr. President, the Audit Committee was scheduled to meet on Tuesday, February 3rd. However, due to a lack of a quorum and attendance of the members, I was forced to cancel the meeting. The Audit Committee of the whole did meet on February 10th at the request of the Office of the State Controller, where we reviewed their preliminary findings of their audit report. To date, their report has not been issued, and that's my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. I have a very I'm just going to say I have a very brief report because the hour is getting late. As you know, I am with NISBA's one of the representatives to the Federal Relations Network, and we had our annual conference in Legislative Day in D.C. 3 weeks ago. And of course, you know what the topic was: stimulus, 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 stimulus. I don't need to tell anyone. You need only turn on the news to see that the economy is going through some challenging times, or as I call it, a correction. And the stimulus was one of the big topics. I know there has been a lot of talk about folks saying that the stimulus is terrible, but the price of doing nothing, I think, will be catastrophic, particularly in the area of education, folks. I would urge all of you to read the stimulus provisions. If you don't read anything else, read the provisions for education. The president has made clear that he is attaching accountability to these things, and a lot of the money will flow via the state and then to be distributed to the district. So it is good that something is being done in terms of making sure that we put forth something to fill the gaps we're being that have been cut because of the financial situation, particularly in New York, where we rely so much on on Wall Street. Malcolm Smith, the speaker, the majority leader in the state Senate, is organizing a public meeting in Rochester. I believe it's on March 26th, and it's going to be on the stimulus. So folks should come and learn more about this. The stimulus is online. It's about 1,000 pages. It took me about an hour to read it, so it shouldn't take you that long. Last topic, number 2. This will interest a lot of you that are in the audience. Large discussion around No Child Left Behind. Large discussion on No Child Left Behind. Not sure if it's going to be changed this year, but there is an appetite in this new Congress, many of whom didn't have a chance to have input because they were out of power in terms of changing some of the provisions of No Child Left Behind. So there was a lengthy discussion about changes to No Child Left Behind, fully funding it, dealing with some of the mandates. So the hour is now to speak to our representatives in Washington about changing provisions of No Child Left Behind that we do not like. Before I conclude, again, I just want to thank the board staff, district staff for their great work during Black History Month. The Black History Musical at SODA on February 5th was absolutely amazing. Same thing with the Taste of Soul at East High School on the 11th. The Oratorical Review here on Tuesday, you had a kindergartner standing up here reciting Frederick Douglass verbatim. I mean, I felt like Doogie Howser had come back to life. It was unbelievable. The kid didn't miss a beat, and he was in kindergarten. He was reciting Frederick Douglass. It was like Frederick Douglass had appeared in this little pint-sized body. It was amazing. And then lastly, you saw the event here on the 26th. And we will continue to do this every year for the Board of Education, recognizing the accomplishments of African Americans. And I'll take any questions folks may have on my report.
I do have an alibi.
Yes, alibi, Commissioner Powell.
As representative of Big Five, I was in Albany lobbying with the Big Five on February 2nd
good.
and 3rd. At that point in time, the administration had been forced to cancel a visit to Albany that was to precede the Big Fives, and I'm curious to find out whether that has been rescheduled and whether our administration people have been to Albany.
Well, we're doing two things, actually. Next week, is it, John? Thursday, we're heading back to Albany to meet with the governor's budget folks as well as some members of the delegation. Tomorrow, we also have a series of meetings with some members of the delegation to talk about the budget, etc. So we have two meetings, series tomorrow, as well as us traveling to Albany all day Thursday to meet with the governor's budget folks.
The long and the short of our lobby trip on February 2nd was that it was dire circumstances, but this was before the passage of the stimulus package. We don't know, or at least we certainly didn't know at that time what the outcomes would be, and I'm very much looking forward to the superintendent's budget on March 30th to close all those, or to answer all those unanswered questions.
Thank you, thank you. We will now move to the considerations of resolutions. But before we move to the considerations of resolutions, may I have a motion from one of my colleagues to extend the time past 8:30? Moved by Commissioner Elliott. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Brennan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And to our student rep, it is getting late, I know, and you are a student, so if you do feel as though you need to take leave to hit the books, please feel free. We will begin with human resources resolutions, resolutions 582 through 619. These are personnel resolutions, so any questions for these resolutions will have to be general, or else we will have to go into executive session. The administration also provided in the Friday packet explanations of every single human resources resolutions under retirements, resignations, and terminations, leaves of absences, and hires. So there's if you have not had a chance to look at those explanations, I have a copy here if anyone needs it. I want to thank the administration for providing those. It makes for some great night reading. So I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 582 through 619. And when I do these, I'm going to go through a voice vote, roll call vote, excuse me, so that way I can make sure the clerk is able to capture the yeses and nos. So I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 582 through 619.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Powell. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Brennan. And we'll start with Commissioner, actually I started that way. This time I'll go back this way. We'll start with Commissioner Williams.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay, go ahead.
The first one is Resolution 603. And specifically it has to do with the grant for the AP programs. It's not so much a personnel question, more of a sort of a general question itself.
Six oh three.
603.
Federal grant to increase.
Extended day and credit recovery. On page 18, correct?
What says a federal grant to increase access to advanced placement courses for students in 14?
The one for...
Yes, but there's right in the middle.
Yeah, in the middle.
The first one is the
Yes.
extended day. The
Right
second
there.
is for the AP program.
Yes.
First question is, what's the plan here? And sort of what's the outcome in terms
Sure.
of...
This was part of, I believe, nearly $3 million grant. Is Bob Hassler here? Nearly $3 million from the feds as an advanced placement initiative to increase the number of advanced placement courses in the district, PSAT, pre-AP, etc. My letter last Friday, I believe, had a page outlining the salient pieces of the grant. Do you want to add some things, Bob, quickly?
Last year, the district applied for and was approved for this grant to increase advanced placement enrollment and courses in 14 of our pervasive need high schools. So that's all of the schools except for School of the Arts, Wilson, and East, which were viewed as already having fairly extensive advanced placement programming. However, those 3 schools will benefit from the grant by including Mandarin Chinese as a course in those buildings. So over the next 3 years, the goal is to increase our offerings in each one of those 14 high schools. And what the proposal was before you tonight was that the grant allows for 3 teachers to serve as .5 zone coordinators to assist with the work of the zone schools, but also to each one of them to hold expertise in the content areas of math, science, and ELA. And for this year, those teachers chose not to leave their students, but to ask if we could do something through additional pay instead of release time. Because we started the grant, we weren't approved for it until after October, and their schedules and teaching loads were already set.
Just to add to that, Commissioner, the APIP grant is very competitive. As one who applied for it twice when I was in New York City, it is not one that's easy to get. Clear metrics and clear outcomes are outlined in the grant. If you'd like a copy, I can forward that to you. It's pretty extensive.
Okay, and then just the other thing, what about other programs like IB or the other enhancement programs? Is there anything scheduled to?
No, the feds don't give dollars to expand IB. That's something if we want to do internally as a district, we can do. It is part of our long-term goal of looking at moving IB not just from Wilson, but other schools in the district. The AP piece is one that the feds will support right now, but they don't provide funds for IB programs, unfortunately.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner?
Just one other, and this has to do with Resolution 611. And on page 26, just the second person from the bottom, looking at that hourly rate, it looks out of sync with all the others. Does that, just want to see if that's, check that to see if that's correct.
Michelle, it's page 26, second from the bottom. It seems to be, I agree, it seems to be much higher than the other. Is that because of, most are at either the 9 or the teens. This one's at 2289. Yeah.
That would be based on potentially years of experience. If they come with, they get so much credit or time based on their years of experience.
Okay. No,
Okay.
When I look at it, it just seems to be one of the outliers.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
in terms of,
And it also could be the assignment as well, if that teacher assistant is assigned to a particular type of classroom, children with special needs.
okay.
So teachers, I believe, by contract for extra pay, it tends to be pretty standard. But
Yes.
teacher assistants are hourly employees, so
That's right.
that changes from person to
Can that
person.
be verified?
We'll double check.
Yeah, we can double check.
Sure.
That's not a problem.
Okay, Commissioner Powell, any questions on, okay? Vice President White, any questions on human resources?
No.
Commissioner Elliott, any questions on human resources resolutions?
Am I supposed to vote? Are we voting?
No, I was asking you a question. I'm going to call the vote in a
No,
second.
thanks.
Okay, okay, Commissioner Brennan?
I'm fine.
Okay, I'll do a roll call vote, starting with Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Powell,
Yes.
Commissioner Vice President White,
Yes.
Commissioner Elliott.
I have no's.
Okay.
584,
Mm-hmm.
589, 590, 592, 594, and 596 through 614.
Madam Clerk, have you captured those?
Through 614.
Commissioner Campos?
Yes.
Commissioner Brennan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We will now move on to Resolution 620 through 630, educational facilities. I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 620 through 630.
So moved.
Moved by Vice President White. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Powell. Discussion, and again, I'll do it the same way I did it in the last way. I'll start with Commissioner Williams. Questions on 620 through 630?
Yes. I
Okay.
do. Quite a few, as a matter of fact. Starting on Resolution 621. And
Mr. Fenton?
the question here relates to a report that I just read that was put out by the Auditor General, and it talks about what's going on with the SIP, between the SIP and what's actually being bidded out. I just sort of went back and started to check and see whether or not some of the points that she made were indeed happening. And when I start at 621, there seems, well, overall, it seems as if when the SIP was approved, it was approved not only for a specific amount, but we had specific renovations to be done. But when I look at what's bid here, both in terms of the amount and the actual items, I can't make a one-to-one map in terms of what was in the SIP and what's actually occurring in.
The scope of work should be identical to what was in the CIP for this.
No, it's not. In the SIP, for example, in this case, the amounts are, let's look at school number 4. The amounts are correct in terms of 422, but in the SIP, we had $30,000 to provide air conditioning, $100,000 for an emergency generator replacement,
Right.
And then another $200,000 for ceiling fans, remodel the teacher's lounge and staff room, and the staff restroom, a new PA system, and then another $30,000 item to replace the cyclorama.
Right.
But I can't map that here on this.
The bid sheet should show, by Wick's law, we have to bid the prime contract separately. But the scope of work that was bid is for that scope of work that you just described.
Okay, let's go through, because on one we have, say, the HVAC work, which is the Danford, coming up at $57,000.
Right.
Okay? Now, where is that in the SIP?
Well, that could be, and I'm not entirely sure this is it, the computer room, equipment room, and HVAC work on the classrooms. Because we have to bid them separately by trades, not by scope of work.
Okay.
So take the ceiling fans, for instance, and the remodeling of the teachers' rooms. Those projects may have multiple disciplines involved. So we have to bid the projects by discipline, by HVAC, by plumbing, by electrical. So the scope is packaged together by separate trades, not by the $30,000, $100,000, $200,000. That's the project.
How do you map it? I mean, if I want to go and I say, well, who's doing say, the emergency generator? Or, okay, probably I could make it even more specific. Let's go to school number 5, okay? Now, in school 5, well, to start off with, there's the SIP that you have listed in the bid is $1,007,000. In the SIP, it's $1,037,000. So there's $30,000 that's unaccounted for somewhere. But it's minor. I'd still like to get a resolution.
Is this school 5, excuse me?
Pardon?
Is this school 5?
Yes. School 5.
I have 1.4 in the CIP.
1.4 in the CIP in school 5?
Yeah, for the total budget. 1.4, 1,490,000.
No. When you,
School number 5, I beg your pardon, if you look at the wording of the resolution, it's what was budgeted for this year, in this year's CIP was 1 million, I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe right.
1,007,000, but we also had 653,000 in carryover
Right.
Well-
projects that weren't done
yeah.
when they've, from
But
last year.
before you get there, that 1,007,000, in the SIP, it's 1,037,000. Okay. But again, it's 30,000, but that's minor in comparison to everything else. So you have $1 million, $1,037,000, and then you have 653 that's being carried over from the prior year's SIP, which was for,
Windows.
I think, the Windows replacement. Now, when I look at the window replacement, the SIP in 2007, that number was about $1,300,000 or $1,400,000. So again, I mean, it's tough to map. And not only that, but, you know, it's a lot of money floating around. People are transferring monies into and out of the contingency, whatever the contingency is.
Right.
I can't get a handle in terms of,
I'm sorry, it's not the contingency.
no, not here, but on all the others. They're transferring monies into and out of this contingency. And there doesn't seem to be any transparency, no accountability, and no board oversight. And I don't know who controls this contingency or the amount of the contingency.
Well,
All I know is,
the contingency's in every resolution, what it is per project, and it's on the cover sheet here.
well,
And then what we've done, because it's a 5-year capital plan that we bid and execute over several years. At any given project, we may be over or under in contingency, but at the end of the year, we balance the contingency 10%, and that is all visible. I mean, we show you the documentation and we bring the resolutions to you.
no, let's go back to number 4, okay?
Okay.
You started with 422, which was the amount of the SIP. The bids that came in were 388. Okay,
Right.
quite a bit different. So I take it there must have been a change in scope somewhere.
Well, point of clarification, the 422 is the project budget,
Right.
which considers that there'll be a 10% contingency and 20% soft costs.
Okay, but then I have another problem, because even after that's bid, when it came in at 388, then you added another 10% contingency and another 20% soft cost to bring it up to 513.
Well, that's right. The bid came in at 388,
Uh-huh.
and we added 10% to, and then the 20%. The budget of 422 anticipated that we would get bids below 422, add 10% for contingency, because that's the amount that we're holding in reserve. We're not sure. These are construction projects on buildings that are 62 years old. And then the 20% is the soft cost for design fees and that kind of thing.
But the design fees are already known. By the time these bids are let,
Right.
you have an exact number for both your design and your contract design and architectural fees, right? So why do we have another 20%?
Because you can charge back to the Department of Ed for 20% of the total cost, not what you spent managing that project, but 20% of the final dollar. Mr. President, with your permission, I want to interject and say that the Finance Committee, as of this past month, because we are in the season of adopting these construction projects, I have asked that copies of the CIP be brought to every single Finance Committee until we're through this season, and we can have these questions at the Finance Committee meeting. They're open to any member of the board, and that invitation is a standing invitation, but it's especially important when we consider how much this line of questioning is taking up.
Well,
Right.
first of all,
Okay.
CIPs are already available to all board members.
What I'm saying is that when the resolutions are coming before the board in the Finance Committee, what I'm saying is that I'm making sure that the CIP is readily available to make these comparisons just as you are and to ask these questions in the Finance Committee just as you are now. Last week was the time to do this.
No.
I'm sorry, go. Okay,
May I-
just finish with your,
Okay. So
rounds.
let's go through this again, Mr. Fenton. Started at 422, which you said included a 20% or 30% contingency or markup, 10% contingency, 20% for soft costs, correct?
10% contingency plus 20%, 10 and 20.
Okay, so that number is already...
That was the plan. That's what we budgeted. But the 388 is what really came in when we put it out to bid.
Okay, and then you added the...
It's not another. The 422 is the plan. That's the budget.
Right.
388 is what actually came in. Then we
Okay.
have to add 10% because we're going to hold that as contingency, and 20% for soft costs.
Okay, so which brings it up to 513.
Right.
Okay, and now...
So this one's over.
Yeah, so you're over. So then you transferred in another $91,000 from somewhere, from some contingency.
From the overall CIP contingency.
Right, okay, right, and that's...
An aggregate.
Yeah,
This
that's
is one individual
okay.
project of multiple projects.
So that's the first issue I have. In terms of this overall CIP contingency, how much is that? What's the balance there?
Well, and this particular, just to put it into context, what you're seeing tonight represents about a third of the CIP for this year. So you're seeing about a third of the projects that are being bid right now.
I understand. My question is...
In aggregate, the entire packet that we have tonight is 31,000 below contingency. Now, we may come back to you with the next package and be $100,000 over contingency.
My question is, though, for this contingency that's out there somewhere, that someone has control over, what's the balance right now?
The contingency is what we budget and hold in reserve for things that we can't plan for. For instance.
But where, okay, let me put this another way. Where does this $91,000 come from? Because it's 91 here.
It's budgeted. Is a part of the total CIP for the bond and cash capital. We'll take 10% of that in any given year. So if we had $1 million, we would hold $100,000 in reserve for contingency, things that we can't plan for but that come up through construction.
Plus plus another 20%?
Well, the 20% is the 20% soft costs that apply to any job, and again, that's by state education department rules.
Okay, so with this contingency, whatever it is, and I still haven't got an answer yet in terms of what the balance is, who controls that? How is the money transferred either into or out of it, and who has oversight? I mean, certainly not the board.
It's a part of the capital plan. So you control it in the sense that if you don't approve this resolution tonight, we won't do these projects this summer, and we won't allocate $91,000 from overall contingency to this project.
So if the board says we aren't going to transfer this contingency in, then what?
Well, if you vote no on this resolution, then the contingency is not transferred in, and then these projects won't be executed.
Okay. Okay. But I still can't, that's going back to my original point, in terms of mapping what was in the CIP and what's being bid, there's no correlation. And it seems as if what happens is that you come before the board and say, look, we need $10 million. And out of that $10 million, we will do A, B, C, and D. And that's what the board approves. And that's what the board, I would assume, expects that you will do. What seems like is happening in reality is, once you get the money, then someone else decides, instead of doing A, B, C, and D, we'll do X, Y, and Z, without ever coming back to the board to say there's been a change in scope, and this is what we want to do. And that's the problem that I'm having. And that's one of the issues that was raised in the Auditor General's report. That, once the change in scope occurs, somebody makes a change in scope, and it's evident when you go through these next 4 resolutions that happens.
Well, let's understand the process. The CIP, in its normal construction process, we look at a building, we identify what needs to be done. We go through the steps of conceptual design, schematic design, and the level of detail and the accuracy improves over time as you get to more detail about what it is that you're actually doing. Right up, and this is one step in the process where now we've received bids. We've planned, we've budgeted, we've made an estimate of what we think it would cost, in this case $422,000. Now we've gone out to market with the same scope of work, and the actual bid came in at $388,000. So on this particular project, we'll go over in contingency, but there are others will be under contingency. And in aggregate, for the CIP for the year, we will be right at the 10% contingency. We won't be over, we won't be under. And that's been best practice for years.
Well, no, the contingency is one issue. The issue that I have, okay, is that there's been a substantial change in scope for the projects that are being done compared to what was in the SIP.
I disagree. I don't think that's accurate.
Well, let's map it. Help me map it. Help me map either for School 5, for School 6. East High School was probably a little more complicated, or School 28.
As identified earlier, if you look at the scope of work in the CIP, we don't bid it by the scope of work. We bid it by Wick's law, by specific trades. We have to break them out into separate trades.
I understand.
So the HVAC contractor may be providing bids for work that involves multiple scope items, but it's all the HVAC work, or it might not even be all of it, it might be a portion of it. And then same thing with electrical and plumbing. But if you look at the scope of work, what's being done, and in this case, School 4, the scope of work is, as the CIP indicates, and what has been bid, is work to do the computer room air conditioning equipment, the generator, the ceiling fans, and a curtain for the gym and auditorium.
Which school is that? School
4.
Okay, let's go to School 5. Okay, and there's one item in there, number 3. Now we're going to replace the boiler. Okay, and all the associated equipment, and that comes up to something in the range of $300,000. And then item number 3, you say you will provide asbestos abatement in conjunction with the boiler replacement, $250,000, right?
I'm not tracking with you.
Well, I'm looking at the SIP for 2008. And the item here, it says, provide asbestos abatement in conjunction with the boiler replacement, $250,000. Okay? Now, when I look at the scope of work that's being bid, I see asbestos abatement comes up to $27,000. Big difference. I mean, I could see you being off maybe 5%, 10%, but here you're almost 80 and 90% off.
One of the things that you have to understand about our buildings is they're 62 years old.
I understand.
One of the challenges, though, in terms of estimates versus actual, is the drawings aren't very good. So frequently, when you get in to really bid the project or to do the work, you find conditions that you couldn't estimate. Because we don't have, like in some of our newer schools, you can look at a CAD drawing and get very specific information about what's there. But it's not necessarily true.
Right,
so
and
it's not unusual for a bid to come in different than what we budgeted, which is part of the reason why we hold a contingency.
But not that big. I mean, if you're telling me
items.
the scope of work is $250, and it comes in at $27,